Hey guys, welcome to the TRT and Hormone Optimization YouTube channel. My name is Danny Bossa. I'm joined today with a very special guest. He's an IFBB pro bodybuilder with a Bachelor in Science from the University of Oregon in Psychology and Exercise Science, a multiple all-time world record holding powerlifter. He's the founder of the Vertical Diet 3.0 ebook with a hard copy available at Barnes & Noble this coming August 10th. He's appeared on Shark Tank, built 5 multi-million-dollar companies in the last 17 years. He's conducted over 200 seminars in 10 countries, all 50 states. He's also trained Hafthor Bjornsson, also known as the Mountain from Game of Thrones, Brian Shaw, Lane Johnson from the Eagles, Stone Cold, Steve Austin, and dozens of world-class professional athletes. He's been sponsored by, appeared and written for Muscle Development, Muscle and Fitness, Flex Magazine, Power Magazine. Currently training UFC's light heavyweight champion John Jones for his heavyweight debut. Please welcome everyone, Stan Efferding, to the channel. How you doing, Stan?
Boy, how arrogant I feel having written my own prelude there. But better you than me, I suppose. Thanks for having me on, man. I love your show. I binge watch all the time. I love your format. You guys just get right to the point. Chris Masterjohn says, details, schmeetails, just tell me what works. That's exactly the way I do it in my ebook and with my clients. I just give you a checklist. I try and put it in some sort of hierarchy as to most to least important, and we knock it out and tell you just to do this stuff. And so that's what we're going to try and do today, is just some short videos that give people exactly what they need to do so they can move on and get the results they want.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always a thin line trying to figure out how much is too much and too little. Sometimes you do too little and they complain you didn't give enough detail. And then you give too much detail, like, just give it to me in the condensed version, but you can't make anybody happy. So
indeed,
try to find that middle ground, but it's not always, there's always something.
I agree.
So we're going to be doing a series of 4 kind of short little videos. This is going to be the first video of the little series. The subjects that were brought up by Stan himself. So the first video we're going to be talking about is a list of 10 things that make you weak. So those of you all on TRT, you're trying to get strong, you're trying to get better, you're trying to improve. We're going to get 10 tips from a master in this realm. So Stan, please tell me what these 10 things are. I'm dying.
Let's get started. These are things I've experienced myself, so I have plenty of anecdotes. And lots of my clients have brought these things to me over the years, so there's plenty of testimonials, but they bump up against the science well. The first one, everybody knows, we don't have to belabor the point, is loss of sleep. And that's the easy one. That's the free one. That there's not much more people than it's just, there's no magic to it. People don't afford themselves an opportunity to be successful because they stay up too late and they wake up too early and burning the candle at both ends, and it affects everything downstream. So that's an easy one. Get 7+ hours of sleep a night. It's going to have a dramatic effect on everything. The thing about these things that make because they're things we do to ourselves that impair our performance ability. And so that is something we do to ourselves. Lack of sleep generally is controllable, and just regarded highly enough. And then we're running around looking for quick fixes to try and solve the elephant room, which is just to get the 7+ hours, set yourself up to be successful. I have a whole chapter on it, good sleep hygiene. All those things that are important: cool room, quiet room, dark room, not too much blue light at night, waking up at the same time in the morning, getting exposed to sunlight to set your circadian rhythm. All of those things are obviously critical, and we can get down into details, elsewhere. But for right now, fix that. Everything else falls in place. So that's number one. And I'll just go down a list of things that we tend to do to ourselves. Number 2, taking antacids. I have a whole chapter in my book on how that adversely affects performance. It's protein absorption and mineral absorption. And people often will take antacids and then wonder why they're having performance problems. And I have a whole list of things that you can do so that you can get off of antacids in my ebook that are very important. Chewing your meals slower, eating your protein first, maybe supplementing hydrochloric acid. It's so critical. It has a major effect. And I've found many times as I come across clients or I give seminars that I will tell people that it's very common for someone who starts taking antacids to just a few months later end up back at the doctor getting antidepressants. And people will approach me after the event and say, "I thought you were talking to me." And so it's sad that people don't understand these are, intended to be very short term for extreme circumstances when you have, acid reflux that's caused, burning in your esophagus, etc. And they're not intended for the long term, and they can absolutely impede protein breakdown and mineral absorption and lead to all sorts of health problems. So we try and get people off the antacids as soon as we can. When that's something that they're using. And when I get a client questionnaire, it's a specific question I ask: "Are you taking antacids?" And that's goal number one, is to get them off of those.
Is eating the protein first to ensure that you're slowing down digestion so that everything that follows stays down, or is it just to prioritize eating more protein?
It stimulates hydrochloric acid, and that's a key component. People think that antacids, that acid reflux is a result of high acid, and it's not. In the vast majority of cases, it's a result of low acid, and that creates gas and bloating, which then causes a splashing of that acid into the esophagus. It can be from, the esophageal sphincter, which can be affected by caffeine intake, relaxing that sphincter. There's a whole host of different things. Obviously, high gas foods address that with a low FODMAP menu. Maybe moving after eating as opposed to laying down. A whole list of things you can do. But suffice it to say, if you're on antacids, you should endeavor to get off of those. That's not a long-term solution.
Okay, gotcha.
Next one on my list, you've gone over in great detail, and I've even copied and pasted your videos to send to people when they ask me about anti-estrogens. Get off of anti-estrogens. If you're currently taking anti-estrogens, it can have a whole host of adverse effects. And I think you can reference a video that goes over it in great detail. But that's one of the first things I do. I reduce the amount of testosterone that they use, if that's the case. Obviously, weight loss, sleep improvement, all those things. Use lifestyle methods or better dosing protocols to manage that rather than taking anti-estrogens, because they'll crush your libido. It'll impair your endothelial function. I mean, there's a whole host of things that you want to avoid. And anti-estrogens have been very liberally used by HRT clinics, and I think that's a terrible idea, as you well know.
Yeah, guys, while you're watching, this is kind of the reason why Stan and I wound up speaking, is apparently he's been referring people to our videos about not taking an AI and fearing estradiol. There's a guy by the name of Chaz Engel who had contacted me saying, "Yeah, Stan sent me your way to watch the videos." I reached out to Stan, and this is how we got into talking. So are you, when you're talking about AI lowering, like, are you talking about reducing it or eliminating entirely? What do you find there's a time and a place for using an AI? Is it more for guys on, steroid cycles and synthetic compounds, or you find there's a place for guys on TRT, or what's your take on that?
Boy, that's a broad swath. People on hormone replacement therapy, some, as you know, respond more sensitively than others. They might get acne, they might get water retention, they might start to have greater side effects than others based on a given dose. I like to reduce, microdose. I'll use less testosterone more frequently in order to try and manage that. If you're talking about in the performance enhancing drug world amongst athletes, I'll use an ancillary that will help suppress estrogen conversion, such as a Masteron or a Primobolan, instead of using an anti-estrogen, or use less aromatizable drug and use a different less aromatizable drug if they want to increase their total number of milligram usage a week. And that's, it's individualistic and dose dependent. So everybody's a case by case, but generally speaking, I think that people just hear, hey, your estrogen's elevated, and then start blasting you with anti-estrogens. And next thing you know, you have all those side effect problems. Yeah. Your libido crushed. And people also need to realize that those normal ranges don't necessarily apply to people on super physiological doses, because it's a ratio, about a 10 to 21 ratio of testosterone to estrogen that you're shooting for. So we have to be cautious and look at side effects, and if there's any other alternative ways to manage those symptoms.
Yeah. I'll just bring this up because it comes up often if people message me, though, because I do speak with quite a few guys that are on cycles of a number of different compounds. And they're like, when I'm on TRT, I can get by just fine without an AI. But every time I get on this other stuff, I always need one. And I don't even necessarily take high doses. And what they often fail to understand is testosterone's converting into estradiol, and that's typically a good thing. When you're taking synthetic compounds, they're converting into synthetic estrogens, and those synthetic estrogens are the ones that often cause these issues. Those guys sometimes need to take an AI to prevent the conversion into synthetic estrogens, whereas on TRT, oftentimes they don't need. So there's guys that lump every estrogen into one little pile. There are many, 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 many different types of them. So make sure you're distinguishing between estradiol and everything else. Okay.
Indeed.
Good advice, guys. Another, I get a lot of flack from the guys that are, everybody needs an AI, and some guys need it, and so on and so forth. And we're just seeing more and more of the ones that are either using none or using very small amounts.
Indeed. Let's jump on to, I think we're on to number 4 now, and this one's going to surprise you, but taking metformin, particularly for athletes. And I found this anecdotally from when I tried it many, many years ago. And then my athletes, and I would over and over, I would hear them say, hey, I've lost a lot of strength recently. And through some subsequent questioning, I find out they're on metformin. It impedes glucose absorption, which is very important for anaerobic performance. Now, if you're a diabetic, it's the number 1 prescribed medication for type 2 diabetes and to prevent or reverse type 2 diabetes in the world. Very effective, very few side effects. Having said that, it can impair performance, anaerobic performance. It interferes with mitochondrial function, and it also limits the hypertrophy response from training. I know there were a lot of people on this bandwagon for a long time. I've been around for 30 years in this business. And so I see all of the different waves and the trends. And I think it was David Sinclair was talking on Joe Rogan about metformin, and even Dr. Peter Attia was talking about metformin. And I just waited. I'm patient. And sure enough, 3 years later, David Sinclair was back on Joe Rogan talking about, well, it doesn't seem that it's be all end all, and it can interfere with hypertrophy results. And so I only take it on my days off of training, blah, blah, blah. There's always these caveats. They tend to learn. I found this with the keto diet with a lot of folks. How, I could go down the list of people, Dr. Peter Attia, I could, Paul Saladino, Mike Mutzel, Mark Bell. I can go down the list of people that tried keto, which I certainly did. I've been competing since 1986. And every single time I tried it, I lost strength and my performance declined. That's not to say it can't be an effective diet for weight loss, but when it comes to performance, there are some caveats to it that carbohydrates do benefit in an acute fashion, and not just an adequate amount, but this goes kind of down deep into the recent research that Brad Schoenfeld put out in his book, Hypertrophy book, and that Mass Research Review and Greg Nuckols talked about, that carbohydrates fueling performance, it's not like a gas tank where you can go 100 miles an hour on a quarter tank just as well as a full tank. It's more like pressure in a balloon, that a full balloon is going to exert more pressure than a 1/4 full balloon. And the carbohydrates that are preferentially used for performance are in the sarcoplasmic reticulum inside the muscle cell, and that's also the first carbohydrates that's depleted. And so the muscle full effect of carbohydrates does seem to have an effect for performance. We're talking about elite performance, and which is a lot of the people that I deal with: CrossFitters, football players, powerlifters, bodybuilders, strongmen, etc. It impairs performance. Hydration is another component of that too, if we're going to talk strictly keto. But back to metformin, it can impair performance. It's great for glycemic control, particularly for people who suffer from type 2 diabetes. Having said that, it's twice as effective simply to take a 10-minute walk after each meal daily than it is to take metformin. This has been studied and researched to show that just a 10-minute walk after meals is twice as effective to reverse and prevent type 2 diabetes as metformin. So if you are taking metformin, you absolutely 100% should be also taking 10-minute walks after meals, because it's the pair of them together can be fantastic. But if you're taking metformin as a performance athlete, thinking it's going to improve insulin sensitivity, the mechanism of action of that is to prevent glucose absorption and uptake. And that's not something that you want as an athlete. So if you're not an athlete, eat fewer carbs, take a 10-minute walk, get better sleep. We're going to go over that today in the high blood sugar quick fix kit in a subsequent video. But that's my spiel on metformin. I'm not telling you not to take it. I'm telling you that
the timing that you take it affect it, or is it if you take it, this is going to be your issue no matter what? Like, could you adjust for people that do take it? Could they adjust the timing as to when they take it throughout the day to improve? Take it way outside of your training window, or?
Yeah, I would suggest there's more effective methods for people that are taking it.
Okay.
And I would also suggest that, and we'll go over that today in the high blood sugar quick fix kit. I would also suggest that the only feedback I've gotten is that from, say, David Sinclair, who said, well, Peter Tia no longer takes it, and he used to swear by it. He took it as a longevity medication, and he no longer does. It tells you something when these longevity focused, these are genius people. These are very brilliant individuals. All these are PhDs or MDs that we kind of know and trust, really. We listen to, and we watch their personal experience over the course of many years. I mentioned Peter Tia, Mike Mutzel, Paul Saladino, Mark Bell. All of them were keto and then came off of keto, and their specific reasoning is that it impaired their specific workout performance. Most of them went to using carbs around workouts to get the benefit of the training stimulus and then go back to keto if that was their preference subsequent to the workout. So I'll be fair that they use more of a carb timing scenario just so they can optimize their training window. And metformin, David Sinclair said that he just takes it on days off of training.
And would berberine pretty much be?
I think it'd be very similar.
Same?
Yeah, and I think it'd be very similar. I think it has more to do with kind of one of my next on my list is its anti-inflammatory benefit, which may not be a benefit when you're talking about the acute inflammatory need post-training to trigger that cascade of anabolic hormones that gives you the benefit from training. Mm-hmm. And that the next one on my list after metformin would be NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agents. Not only can they dig big holes in your stomach, but they impair your training response, the hypertrophy response from training. So that's something I also avoid is NSAIDs. I don't think that acute inflammation is, particularly from a training stimulus, is of any concern. Elderly people who have chronic inflammation may need NSAIDs. I would hope there was other avenues they could pursue, because NSAIDs do have the problem with people with digestion issues and causing really hard on the lining of the stomach. But generally speaking, I try and get all of my athletes off of NSAIDs as well. Kind of brings us to the next one, which is statins. Mm-hmm. Look, I don't interfere with people's medical advice. I'm not a holistic practitioner that claims that food fixes everything and that cures cancer, et cetera. I'm not that guy. We work closely with people's doctors to make sure that when we're working to get them off of medication, which ultimately should be the goal, that they maintain their health or it's warranted. Statins can cause muscle weakness. It's very well fettered out in the literature. It's hard to determine how many people, because over half the people who are prescribed statins don't take them. So and many of the rest don't tell their doctor or just kind of deal with the side effects because they think that the alternative is worse. But we endeavor to get people off of statins, our clients, if it's having an adverse effect on their performance, if they're experiencing muscle weakness. And so that's another one on the list.
Are you of the mindset that cholesterol isn't the big scary monster that everyone believes it is?
Well, it kind of depends. I mean, when you look at the really smart people in the industry, we do see that LDL is causal, but there's some caveats to that. If you have low triglycerides, high HDL, if you don't have other endothelial damaging problems such as high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high iron, then the likelihood is minimal, and that's within reason. You know, an LDL of 150, 170, whatever. I mean, that's something you should work on. If you got an LDL of 300, probably a different problem. You know, and it's usually what you see associated with an LDL of 300 for most people is that it's more a marker of other problems. You're obese, inactive, you know, a low fiber diet. There's a whole host of things that you're doing that is probably better to fix those lifestyle problems. Maybe, you know, jump on your doctor's statin if you're not willing to do any of those things. You know, what other choices are there? I feel for doctors when a client comes into their office that's, you know, obviously 50 pounds overweight and sedentary and overeating and high blood pressure and et cetera. And the doctor knows they've got 7 minutes to solve this problem, and the client is very unlikely to fix any of the lifestyle issues. I'm writing a statin if I'm the doctor. And you have to by obligation, because if you don't, and the person walks out in the parking lot and has a heart attack, it's your fault. Yep. Right. Yeah. So I'm not pointing the fingers at doctors on this one. I think that we take responsibility for our own actions. And I think there's that if you do the things that you should be doing, it's pretty rare that you're going to have complications unless you have hypercholesterolemia, you know, some sort of genetic predisposition, or some, as mentioned earlier, some endothelial damage from other causes, which may or may not be remedied by lifestyle. Right. So I do check a host of other factors, or ask that, you know, I work closely with a doctor here in town. And so I'm able to run my client's blood work through and discuss these things with him. And so I don't make these recommendations on my own, but I suggest that they consult people that can give them some lifestyle options and monitor them over time, so that they don't feel like that it's a life sentence that they're on some medication. Right.
No, I talk to guys there now and then. They're taking in 5,000-6,000 calories a day, and they run labs, and their cholesterol lipid values are, you know, marked off in red. But you look at everything else, and everything else is great. And they're like, should I be concerned? I'm like, well, there's no other underlying condition. You have this one thing because you're just eating a shit ton of food, and it's skewing your values. But, you know, in the absence of a bunch of other underlying conditions, it should be all right. So,
yeah, it's a range of risk. It's most certainly lowering your LDL is going to decrease your risk, but what's your risk? And that depends on a number of other markers for sure. So I wouldn't want to ever say that LDL didn't matter, but and you could implement a host of lifestyle behaviors, even in the calorie surplus. And we'll talk more about this in a subsequent video. But even in the calorie surplus, if you manage metabolic syndrome, if you don't succumb to fatty liver disease, and you take some precautions, maybe a smaller calorie surplus, maybe oscillating your weight throughout the course of the year, not staying too heavy too often, adjusting saturated fats by using leaner protein sources, you have some options. And it wouldn't hurt you to, a lot of what I do with my athletes is I kind of mitigate damage and ask them to bring their weight down to become more metabolically healthy, and then we can take them back up when needed for competition. I don't let them stay at the heavy weight with the metabolic syndrome for an extended period of time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I covered that in a video called, what was it called? Something about the difference between health and fitness. If you want to be healthy, don't compete, is what the video is called. And there's a big difference between health and fitness. Fitness being the ability to perform a particular duty or task. That might not be very healthy if you're a world's strongest man, or even a UFC fighter, or even a 14-year-old gymnast at the Olympics. You know, the fitness level required to perform at that level is not necessarily healthy, either internally or externally. You know, you're subjecting your body to some pretty extreme demands. And so I'll kind of leave that there with statins. It takes me on to antibiotics, and they may be necessary acutely for certain circumstances, but taking too much of them too often interferes with digestion. It takes us right back to things like NSAIDs or antacids. Anytime you're impairing your body's ability to break down proteins or absorb minerals, you're going to have problems with performance in particular. So I think everybody's pretty comfortable with the fact that antibiotics are something that you should use cautiously for very specific needs through supervision of a doctor. For a while there, people were popping Z-Packs like candy. Every time they get a cold, they pop a Z-Pack. And I don't think they realized the both short-term and long-term negative effects of that. So we certainly recommend against that as much as it's not entirely necessary. The next one gets a lot of press, and it's about icing post-workout. Immediately following training, this is right back to NSAIDs and anti-inflammatories. If the training stimulus causes acute inflammation, that inflammation is necessary to trigger the cascade of hormones that's going to give you make your body respond with that, adapt and respond with that hypertrophy response. If you jump in an ice bath immediately following training and you squelch that acute hypertrophy or acute inflammation response, then you will impair your hypertrophy response. So I would suggest using ice if you want to. I don't think it's of much benefit for training response. I think actually maybe the do it on an off day if it's something that you desire, or if you like to do it for other reasons. Some people feel as though it may have some longevity benefits. I don't see a lot of science to that regard either. People talk about a lot of things that that we just haven't fettered itself out in science very well. What's that?
Like the cold showers every morning.
Yeah. I mean, if it's something that you enjoy and but I would just be cautious of when you apply it, and post-workout is not a good time.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the next one would be donating blood. I did a whole video on this, when to donate blood. People over donate. They think it's, I thought we went through this with leeches. When was that? How many thousands of years ago did we start doing that? If you over donate blood, and this is true, as you know, the difference between, polycythemia and erythrocytosis, you've talked about it on your show a lot as well. If you over donate blood and your platelets start to get too low and your ferritin starts to get too low, you will be very lethargic and tired from iron deficiency. So know the difference, and don't be chasing a certain hemoglobin and hematocrit number at the risk of low platelets and low ferritin. Yeah. And this kind of, I could transition this into a discussion about how to control high iron, or whether or not you even have high iron just from a hematocrit or hemoglobin measurement. But even at times like that, donating periodically can be of benefit, but be cautious that you're not creating a situation that causes you to be tired. I never recommend an athlete donate within 60 days of a competition, particularly one that involves any kind of cardiovascular fitness, because that's how your oxygen gets carried in the red blood cells. So I'm cautious with that. You were going to comment?
We got guys that come into our Facebook group saying, my doctor put me on 100 mg of testosterone a week, and I have to do phlebotomy once a week. I'm like, what?
It's tragic.
Guys, if you're going to bloodlet even every month because the doctor says you have to because you're on TRT as an example, no, you don't. That's not necessary. Your blood count will raise a bit on TRT. It's normal to be expected. It doesn't necessarily indicate an issue that has to go with the blood. If you want to get blood because you just want to be a nice person, I want to get blood because if someone needs blood, they got blood. By all means, just don't do it overly often. And we actually posted a paper in the Facebook group about a week or two ago about this new study that came out saying, if you're on testosterone, seeing these levels going up, it's not nearly the concern that they thought it was. So.
Agreed. Yep. And again, there's other tests that can show you whether or not you have high iron, and that's what's presumed by the elevated hemoglobin and hematocrit, or high platelets. If you think you have thick blood, look at the platelets. So oftentimes it becomes necessary to go see an endocrinologist because your general practitioner is not as in tune with these variations. I had that same experience myself. And that's not to say anything bad about MDs. I work with MDs. Not all of them have as much depth of knowledge of some of these nuances particularly when using HRT. So get a second opinion, and it's not Stan's opinion. This is well fettered out in the literature, and doctors who are familiar with this can advise you correctly. I had the same experience. I had a doctor telling me to donate. I went to an endocrinologist, and he said, nope, you're fine. It was the 2-second visit. We spent the rest of the next 20 minutes talking about my bodybuilding. So I'll throw the last one in there. And again, with caution, this would be some blood pressure medications can act as diuretics. And that can cause you obviously to become dehydrated and weak and potassium deficient. And so I'd be cautious which diuretic medications you're using, how much, and if there isn't some alternative lifestyle prevention that you can implement to avoid having to be on that blood pressure medication. And that'll take us into another video that we're going to discuss today. So that wraps up my 10 things that make you weak. I'm sure there's many more, but these are the common things that I see from clients that I wanted to share with people on your site.
Very good. Okay, this is a fantastic list. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Danny.
But if people want to reach out to you or want to know more about you, who you are, social media, if you want to share, these are.
Everything's at Stan Efferding. My website is stanefferding.com. My Instagram is at Stan Efferding. My YouTube, where I talked about all the videos that I've recorded, the free information, is also Stan Efferding. And you can find my ebook, The Vertical Diet 3.0, at stanefferding.com. And you can find my meal prep company, The Vertical Diet, at stanefferding.com, and order prep meals nationwide with free delivery anytime you want.